and welcome to this episode of Rule of Carnage. This is a series of conversations, chats, podcasts, videos between myself, Glenn Ford, and this guy,
Boo!
Mike Hutchinson, also a games designer and developer. Where we have conversations about designing better miniatures games. The reason that we chose to begin in that
Quite
ridiculous
ridiculous manner.
and mischievous manner is that what we're going to try and talk about today is hidden movement. You see, we were hidden and then we moved. Hidden movement mechanics in tabletop miniatures games. So this is something that we have, frankly, repeatedly mentioned on the channel. And
It's one of my favorites. One of my favorites. This.
yeah,
I've spent
and
way too long thinking about this.
and was asked a question about when we did our 2,000 subscribers celebration of getting questions from the Discord. But I don't think we've sat down and had a proper chat about it.
Right, Professor Ford, will you give us a formal definition of hidden movement before I stumble and fall and define something that is other?
All right. Well, I mean, look, on a very obvious sense, it's where you move around and the other person can't see what you're doing and where you are, and what changes you are making to the board state during your turn, essentially.
Yeah.
It can mean simply they don't know exactly the details of a given unit on a probably sort of lesser, more sort of fog of war end of the definition.
Yeah, there's a sort of broader definition that it's just hidden information.
Yeah.
And obviously we talk about hidden movement a bunch because a lot of these games are moving models around on the table, but yeah. Information more generally.
Board games do this much in a bunch, very successfully and splendidly.
Well, those cards that only have the numbers printed on one side, I seem to remember.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, I was going to say Scotland Yard,
yep.
STJ winner, hidden movement, Escape from the Aliens in Outer Space from Osprey is a
Fury of Dracula,
Fury of Dracula, Scotland Yard,
Scotland Yard with vampires.
But board games are replete with them.
There's that bioterrorist one in Pandemic.
Yeah. Pandemic has the expansion with a hidden movement player. Absolutely. They can do this.
But then there's also that, what's that classic one with the little armies that are the wrong way around? It's a bit like
Stratego.
Yeah, like Guess Who, but with armies.
I guess so. Yeah. I guess that's hidden information, certainly. All right, now the reason the board game
battleships. Oh no, you don't move.
You don't move in battleships. The reason board
games... You've never played my 5-year-old. It's devilishly difficult.
but that was a miss previously. But I was.
It's moved. It's sailed off.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, look. The reason
so unrealistic battleships.
The reason board games can do this is that they, first of all, tend to be discrete in their nature.
Yep.
So there's a limited number of places that a given character can be. Secondly, they have
so quite practically you can write down the number of the cell that it's moved into or something.
Absolutely. So let's say Scotland Yard, because it's probably the sort of most famous board game. The person who's trying to hide the spy has a list, and they literally write down A4, B29.
And people, if you haven't played Scotland Yard, play Scotland Yard. It's so fun.
It is a splendid game, and they even mark how they moved from place to place. And in that game, all you've got to do is fill out all of the spaces, move enough times, and then you've escaped. And that speaks to the second reason they can do it is they've got lovely custom components. So Escape from the Aliens in Outer Space has whiteboard flip charts for every single player that has a map of the ship that you're on, and so you can draw on it where you are and mark each turn where you're going, so that at the end everyone can look and check and be like, oh yeah, no, fair enough, you were where you said you were. I see what happened. Minis games don't have either of those advantages by and large.
Mhm.
Um, Describing where a given mini, I mean, if you just think of a tabletop with a mini on it and then think of trying to describe exactly where that mini is at any given moment, where it's ending up, without leaning over the table with a tape measure and obviously showing where the mini would be, you know, it,
Yeah, and so like
almost
if
impossible.
you go back in the archives and you read the 60s sort of, you know, the Featherstone era stuff on this, you will find references to, well, of course, you know, you could just like record your movements on a map, and if you're playing with a GM, then like they can adjudicate whether those movements are sort of fair and equitable. And this particularly, I found this with naval wargaming, where there's a fairly decent tradition of like jotting down what your movements are going to be, essentially, you know, plotting your movements.
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots of like old school games where also sometimes one of the ones I like is you've got generals in one room, a battlefield in another room, and generals in another room, and agents that have to like listen to what the generals are telling them and then go and actually enact it on the tabletop. And in that, you can have the generals being like, well, these things are hidden and they're moving over here. And you've got lots of lovely judges and a gentleman's agreement to be all lovely and honest about it. But again, that's a lot of custom components. And like mentioning,
Two
you know,
rooms, for example.
yeah, whole rooms, multiple human beings to work as umpires, things of that nature. A
Hmm.
human being, an additional human who isn't playing the game, is the most expensive component that you could possibly stuff into a game box, trust me.
Hmm.
um Talking about Featherstone, there's the lovely double blind of the matchbox system that they have in their in his naval games, but that again is making it into a discrete game because the matchbox obviously are basically a grid that you're hiding things in. Uh, Double blind hidden movement, just to say, is, you know, an additional flourish on top of it. So hidden movement is where you don't know where I am. So I could have a little map and I'm drawing where I'm going, and you don't know where I am until you come to a certain point and they go, haha, that's where I was, ambush, etc. Double blind is I'm moving in a hidden method, and then you get to check certain places to see where I am, but I don't know which places you checked because you're scanning with a scanner
Yeah, so
or whatever.
this is like army moves through field sort of surreptitiously. The main army doesn't know, the opposing army doesn't know where they are, except a little spy just spotted them from a bush. Now the spy knows where they are, but the army that just got spotted doesn't know that they've been spotted and continues to make strategic decisions, in absence of the knowledge that they've been spotted, they've been made.
Absolutely. So that's when you've got a double blind system. It's not just where both people are doing hidden movements. That is
Mm.
not a double blind. A double blind is where you don't know the person who has found you, which is doubly difficult to do in games because for the person to check a particular location and not tell you that they're checking that location, where the only person who knows whether you're in that location is you, has inherent problems to it that I don't think it
Yeah, well, it
deserves.
has a component cost. Like you've got to solve that with components, broadly speaking.
Yeah, yeah, to a degree.
Or a
And
computer. This is easy with computers. Yes,
yeah, no,
it's a...
all of this is easy with computers, or by to some degree making the process a little bit more discrete. So, at some point, we'll talk about Pacific Command, which is Mike's game of naval warfare in the Pacific during World War II.
Mm-hmm. Soon to be
Um,
released from Offspray War Games.
Indeed, which has a semi hidden movement, semi double blind system. In the
Yes,
well, do you want to explain the
it's an,
mechanic?
yeah, it's an obscured movement.
Well,
So
it makes it discreet. So
so in Pacific Command, you have a number of poker chips. Some of them are blanks, and some of them contain your task forces. And you arrange those poker chips into a number of stacks. So you might have like 5 or 7 stacks of poker chips, and they might or might not contain uh, within their multiple chips 1 or 2 or more of your task force. So I'm pushing around objects on the table that are about 40 mil circles. And those objects are in a set of known positions, but you don't know what's in them. And so you don't know what I'm moving. Or if you want to go and bomb something, you don't know exactly where to go. But the trick with that system is that when I shoot it with a recon gun slash plane, which is how the recon system works. I fly a plane in that direction, which functions like shooting it with a gun. I roll my recon plane successes, and if I get for each success I roll, I get to draw one of the chips out of that stack. So I'm going to pick up the stack and then I'm going to shuffle it. The shuffling it is crucial. I shuffle it, so um, neither of us know in which order the chips are. You know what's in that stack because you put the chips in the stack, but you don't know which order it is. I pull some chips off, you don't know which. If it's less than all of the chips, you don't know which chips I'm looking at versus which ones I'm not. I get some information. Maybe I tell you what I know. Maybe I don't tell you what I know. That's the double blind thing. And then I put them back, shuffle them, and you have no way of knowing which of the which subset of those chips in that stack I have seen. And so that's why that's important, is in this particular theatre of war, we've got combat units, task forces of ships in just ridiculously large spans of ocean. And if I go and look at where I think you might be and don't find you, there's actually a pretty reasonable chance that you were there. I just didn't find you. And so a negative recon result is something to be treated with suspicion at all times. And so that's what I wanted to build into the flavor of the game, and that's why it was really important for me to find both a hidden movement system and a double blind hidden movement system, because if it was only single blind, it wouldn't have done the thing that carrier warfare in World War II needed to do.
And I think like important to sort of also explain about Pacific Command is that you have a limited number of activation resources each turn, and you can activate to move any of the stacks. So I can move a stack of completely blank chips and pay resources to be allowed to do it and steam it towards an objective. So you go and chunter after it with like destroyers and fleets and send a load of recons after it. Meanwhile, I'm nudging over another stack that actually has the important thing in it. So you can play some bluffing games with that. And also, you can knock 2 stacks into each other and swap the chips over. So a
And you
blank
can
stack.
split stacks into
Yeah,
you can take a stack and sail it in 2 different directions.
yeah. So a set of blank chips that have been checked to know that they are all blank is still very useful to keep activated, because you can then bonk it into a stack that isn't all blank chips and do a little shell game for the other person, which is where a lot of I think a lot of the fun and bluffing in Pacific Command come from. And that's definitely hidden information, and it's definitely double blind. However, as I was sort of saying before, it's definitely discrete sort of hidden movement. I know your your position is one of these whatever 6, 7, 8
That's
locations.
exactly right, because I looked at this problem and I was like, well, there's no way of solving this for non-discrete. Like I've got to, and this was an idea that this is, bingo card. I was definitely going to bring up All Quiet on the Martian Front during this conversation, and so I nicked this idea from Rick Priestley, who had this um, quite simple stealth system in All Quiet on the Martian Front, which I just think is really nice and hasn't been used enough. Which is it's an asymmetrical system where the Martians have a small number of incredibly powerful units, and the humans have a larger number of very weak units. But critically, they have a stealth mechanic, and the stealth mechanic is you deploy as a set of blip tokens, um, and those blip tokens provide a discrete number of locations that the units could be, but you don't know what they are until you get close enough to reveal them, and then, haha, I fooled you again.
Hmm. Now, so something like Fury of Dracula.
Mm.
At the start of Fury of Dracula, Dracula can be in any of the locations that are available in the game. And then he moves
It's like
around,
45 or something.
so something like that. And then he moves around, and there is no evidence of his movement to the hunting players whatsoever. They don't see a blip moving around, they don't see a token moving around. I guess that would be like the highest order definition of hidden movement within a tabletop game. It's just an example of one. There are a few. I guess the $1 million question is anything at all like that possible in a non-discrete minis game?
I mean, not without tedious admin or computers. I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess this is the thing that gets asked. I think that's sort of what people are looking for an answer to. I do not currently. I agree. I do not currently think it is literally possible in the same way without
But
it.
but I don't think that question is as interesting as the more general question of like how can you apply hidden movement in miniature games, because I really like All Quiet on the Martian Front's discretization of movement, and I think that the Pacific Command system is interesting. So whether or not truly analog hidden movement is possible or enjoyable, possible to make enjoyable in a miniatures game, I don't know that that extreme end of the question is necessarily that interesting, because I still think that there's a ton of design space in
I
miniature games that hasn't really been the juice hasn't been wrung from it. But you will have to, as you point out, you do have to translate the problem into something which is, well, actually, there's going to have to be some level of discreteness. There's going to have to be a set number of possible places that these units can be, and it could be as simple as like, we're playing like an epic science fiction level game, and it's like, well, we set up with 12 buildings, like which buildings are you in?
hmm.
But I definitely think that like the the asymmetry of information is really interesting and hasn't been used enough.
Yeah. Now, I think that asymmetry of information is interesting. I do think that competence within a system is a spicy meatball to ask players to engage with. Different asymmetry of um, competence within a system is something that many people find really unpleasant
Mm.
to experience. The simple thing of the stealth player knows all the information within a given system and the non-stealth player doesn't, and some people cannot handle that. Some people
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, it drives them bananas. um
Because they can end up with situations where later in the game it turns out they made the wrong decision, but they had no information to make that decision at the time, and so that's frustrating. It's like, well, there
the
was no
the
way for me to make a good or a bad decision. I simply had to make a decision.
Yeah, it's a sense of I am playing a different game from you because I am playing a game of chance and probability, and you are playing a game of pure tactics and strategy.
Mm.
And that kind of asymmetry, some people can't get past. Now, obviously, like if it's something like All Quiet on the Martian Front, it's pretty much on the banner in big letters that this is what you're experiencing. Um, if it is a dotted around ability that some troops have in a general game that isn't necessarily all about this shtick,
Mm.
be aware that it can really upset certain people, like properly ruin some people's fun. It is competence within a system is something you can check. Like Game Tech is a lovely podcast to talk about it, and like proper psychological testing has been done on people, and it really ruins some people's ability to make rational decisions, like totally out of the window. I think that like I think there's hidden. I think what we have is hidden information. I don't. I agree. I don't think full hidden movement is like possible or interestingly possible. I think it's potentially doable, but as you say, the admin would just create something that I don't think is particularly enjoyable.
Yeah, or you have to be the guy that comes up with the augmented war game, and there's like a little app or something, and
Yeah,
that's fine, and like that's more and more feasible these days.
absolutely. But I do think that like hidden or nebulous information is definitely an interesting thing to play with. And I think that the thing that is important, and referring back to the issue of competence within a system, is what the information is hooked onto, and where the hooks sit and what you can know about the hooks and whether or not it's asymmetrical. So in Pacific Command, it's fine because it's not asymmetrical. I don't know where your ships are, and you don't know where my ships are, and you don't know whether I've looked at your ships, and vice versa. It's all a shell game of a fog of war, and that means it's okay because we're both in the same situation. It's the asymmetry sort of solves it, and I think it's fine if you're like nebulous position is okay. So if it's sort of like, okay, here's my unit, it's a tank, here's the stats of the tank, whatever else it is, but it's currently out of sight, so it's somewhere within, let's say, 6 inches of this particular miniature.
Mm.
And if you can draw line of sight to the miniature, I will then be forced to place it where within the 6 inches it actually is, but it is currently nebulous. And if it goes out of sight even a little bit again, it will suddenly go back to being like it could be anywhere within 6 inches. And I've seen that sort of played with in games. I think we played one that had a little bit of that, of like blips.
I mean, I can think of two examples. So one is, I think this is the way that Infinity like cloaking devices work, and I've definitely read quite recently a naval game where submarines perform exactly like this. So they're like, there's a sort of there's a sort of marker which is the center of a possibility space, but only when I'm forced to do I actually have to actually stick my money on the table and actually choose where the miniature is.
Yeah, and like generally, I think that's fine. It can create weirdnesses where you're like, well, just a minute. So it turns out that tank was just plowing through forest this whole time,
Mm,
and it's like, yes, it was. Suck it.
yeah.
That's what we're doing
It's
here.
got silencer tracks on it.
Yeah, yeah. So I think you can definitely have like nebulous movement in that respect. I think obviously you can have blips, and blips, have that thing of being like some of them are just nothing, and the enemy is going to have to go over and check the blip just in case it's not nothing, and you can play a sort of a game of bluff. What I think is always tricky with a game of bluff in a minis game is giving people the tools to make a sort of double bluff.
Hmm.
Um, and what I mean by that is if I'm moving a blip over to a sort of certain location to get you to chase after it, I need to have the tools to make it so that it is worth me investing um the resources in moving that blip over and not just making it the real thing. It has to be genuinely worthwhile trying to make you go off after a non thing. And then if you don't go off after it not just have been a massive waste of my time and resources trying to tempt you out. And I have to
Yeah,
have
so like
ways.
maybe an implementation of that might be like, well, do you know what? None of the blips are nothing. Some of them are like engineers or sappers, and some of them are whole units. And it's like, well, if this thing moves over here, it's either the whole unit that's going to siege the castle, or it's a sapper that's going to blow a hole in it. But like, it's going to do something. The what it's going to do demands a different rock paper scissors response, and so I've got to try and figure out, well, where are you going to put your rocks and where are you going to put your scissors.
Yeah, and that's ultimately one of the other forms of like hidden information, which is you don't know exactly what this unit is.
Hmm.
And again, like referring to say Warhammer Fantasy Battle, you had hidden fanatics and dark elf
Magic items
assassins
and
and Skaven assassins in units, and magic items were always unknown until you engage the unit,
yeah.
etc., etc. So even like the relatively basic minis games tend to have some level of hidden information. I have to tell you what unit is. I don't have to tell you what the champion's carrying. I don't have to tell you whether the banner is magical, etc., until I activate it. I think that's a very, very sort of standard mechanic. And then obviously, how far you push it into, I don't even have to tell you what the unit is. I don't have to tell you what this particular unit is. They are guys in cloaks and they are disguised. Um, and how that matches in with what you see is what you get and stuff like that. And I think it's an interesting one where it's like a game like Gaslands, which I think a lot of the community have decided is not what you see is what you get. Part of the reason they decided that is because you openly show each other your lists and have a full discussion of what everything is meant to be. If you don't have a full open discussion of your lists, I think it puts a certain amount more weight on the modeling situation. If there is hidden information within the list, and so I can't just show you my list, or I have to pre-prepare a showable one and a not showable one. It puts
Mm.
more weight on making sure that the miniatures are readable as what they are, what information is meant to be open information to the opponent.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Um, if
One other thing that's worth mentioning. So going back to the competence in a system, the problem with asymmetrical information with two players. Another solution to this is to only have one player. So hidden movement can definitely be achievable in a solo system. I've got Perilous Tales, which has one particular implementation of it. Again, it's discrete. In fact, some of the ideas from Pacific Command kind of have their root in Perilous Tales anyway. So Perilous Tales has a selection of tokens deployed on the board. Those tokens have got numbers on the underside of them, but you don't know which number they are. So somewhere the big baddie is hiding underneath a token, and the tokens will move threateningly towards you, and at some point you'll reveal them and discover what's under each of them.
Yeah, I mean, Perilous Tales has to have semi sort of discrete hidden movement because it's a solo game where the hidden movement is being done by the game.
Yeah.
If you were playing Shinobi Assassin, where you're a ninja and the game is operating loads of guards, you are hidden and you have fully non-discrete hidden movement because you're moving around and the guards just can't see you because the guards have a set of AI rules for when they can see you and a set of AI rules for when they can't see you. And yeah, so if you're playing solo, you can have full hidden movement because the game is blind.
Yeah.
You
By
know,
default, the game is blind.
the
Yeah.
game is blind and the game only knows what you decide the game knows. So you can have your ninja stood right behind a temple guard. I don't know, I'm making this, but you can have him stood right behind a temple guard and have the minis on the table. And the temple guard is completely oblivious because you have not triggered the game's knowing conditions. So yeah, the other answer is yeah, make it a solo game, and you can have some lovely hidden
And
movement.
if you want to see an implementation of that, check out Black Ops from Osprey, which has a solo guard mechanic. Um, yeah, and it's like a true one because there's a guard mechanic in Necromunda First Edition, but it's weird because like one of the players is just like, right, so I just have to be these dumbass guards that only move randomly.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Occasionally, in very old games, you see hidden movement mechanics that really feel like somebody has to pretend they don't know something that they obviously do. Why are you doing that over there? No
No, no
reason.
reason. He's just got. He found a shoelace. He's gonna go collect it.
Could be many reasons. Who
Yeah.
knows? All right. So full hidden movement probably not possible, but I haven't
But
read.
there's a challenge laid to you, ladies and
Oh, there's
gentlemen.
that. There's very much a white whale sitting right there for somebody to
Yeah,
to take a
some A
shot
have
at.
to go after.
and I'm more than happy to see it. But what I was going to say is, I haven't read every miniatures game in the world. I'm certain there are
He's
some
pretty close, people. He's pretty close.
out. I'm working my way through the percentage, but look, there may well be
He's
other
in high
games.
double digits at least.
There may well be other games out there that have hidden movement mechanics that we haven't talked about, and there may be games out there that, by some very convoluted notation system, have true non-discrete true hidden movement. I'd love to hear about one of those. Swing down in the comment section, tell us about your favorite hidden, relatively hidden information movement game, miniatures game. When you're going down there to tell us about them, hit likes and subscribes. Tell us whether you think it's literally impossible to make a true hidden movement
Without a
miniatures
GM.
game without a GM or tons of extremely onerous components. And then check out the immediately down below here linky bits. Go through to our Patreons, sign up to either, both, or all of them, and give us
Patronize
money.
us.
Swing by to our website, buy things from us, and then go to the Discord and talk about hidden movement mechanics.
I was going to say, in particular, please buy a copy of Hobgoblin, which by the time this video goes out may well be on general release. So you can click the link and purchase the rulebook.
How thrill-tastic for people.
It is. It's never ending.
But for now, I think from this episode of Rule of Carnage, it'll be a thank you and goodbye. So thank you and goodbye.
All right. See you later. I'm off to play Palladium's Rifts.